If you're visiting with us, we're glad you're here, and I think you're here at kind of a neat time in our church too. And so I hope that as you think about where we are and think about us moving forward, that you'll get excited too. That you will realize that even though we have those occasional Sundays with a big event and lots of energy, that's kind of where we're heading. That's kind of what this church is going to look like, and that we're all going to be a part of that. Now, this morning, I think James will give us some hints about how to get there. Some of them easy for some of us, and some of them may be a little more complex for some of us. And I don't know about you, but as I read through this section this morning, there's some stuff that is hard for me to see and hard for me to read because I realize there are things that I struggle with myself. Now, he begins this way in chapter 5 and verse 7. Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. Be patient. Now, something you may not know about our family is my wife has a very unique talent. And her unique talent is, at any moment in time, she can make up a song. Now, a lot of times it'll be a tune you may have heard before, and she'll get about 3 words in, and you will think to yourself, that's not the words to that song. And she will start to create, out of what's going on, a song. And a song that she has sung from the time our kids were little, and maybe even before they were here, is reminding us to have patience. And every time I think about patience, that's what I'm hearing in the back of my head as I think about it. I think about the fact that I have to be reminded constantly to be a patient person, because I'm not. And if you would have liked to have seen impatient Brian, you could have been here throughout the weekend last weekend. Now, I don't tip my hand a lot on impatient Brian. I try to hide it. I try not to let on. But I realized I did youth ministry for 10 years. From 2001 to 2011, I was a youth minister of a group that ranged from 60 kids to 100 kids during the time we were there. And early on, there was nothing those kids could do that would frustrate me. They had to try really, really hard to get under my skin because I just loved being around them. I would wake up in the morning and think, I get paid to be a youth minister. And I was excited about that. I had gone from working in an insurance company to actually doing something I wanted to do. No offense, insurance people. Shane from State Farm, wherever you're at. I was excited about life. And somewhere in the midst of that 10 years, it began to take a turn. And I started to become a little more of a grown-up in the midst of all that. And then I hit a point where lock-ins were no longer fun. And some of you think to yourself, lock-ins were never fun. What are you talking about? There was a point in my life where lock-ins were fun, and then there was a point where they were no longer fun. And then there was a point where they would do things that if they had done these things to 28-year-old new youth minister me, I wouldn't have cared, but as they were doing these things to 35, 36-year-old old youth minister me, I didn't like them anymore. And I realized I was beginning to lose patience. And during the course of a youth rally weekend, as excited as I am about it, as much as I like seeing our building full, I will have during the course of that weekend 3 or 4 reminders of why I am no longer a youth minister. And I will start to lose my patience just a little bit. And I have to, you might see me walk into my office and think, what's he doing in there? You want me in my office for 40 seconds. You want me there, not out amongst other people for things to happen. Because I need a minute to just, patience. Now, I don't know what that is for you. There are things in this life that make you lose patience, unless you are a whole lot better person than I am. We lose patience. We lose it with people. We lose it with neighbors. We lose it with coworkers. We lose it with family. And he begins by telling us here that we have to be patient as Christians. And the way he tells us to be patient is to be patient until the Lord's coming. Now, you may not have started writing it on your checks yet. Hopefully you're to this point where you're saying 2016 on there. But we're in 2016 now. As James writes this, he is in the 1st century. Not terribly long after the death of Christ and the resurrection of Christ and the beginnings of the church and all of that. And so he's telling these folks to be patient until Christ returns, which they're never going to see. They're not going to see that day. Now, they're going to see Judgment Day and they're going to see heaven and all those things, but they're going to live out their entire lives before Christ returns. And their children are going to live out their entire lives before Christ returns. And their children are going to live out their entire lives before Christ returns. And for all of us, there is a fair chance that we will live out our entire lives before Christ returns. And so what James is telling us is, be patient forever. Well, that sounds easy enough, James. I'd like to be patient through the sermon to see where it's going. I'd like to be patient through a meeting this week that could have been handled by an email. I'd like to be patient this week through a discussion with someone I don't want to have a discussion with, through a class that I don't like going to, through a class that I don't like teaching. I'd like to be patient with middle schoolers this week, with insurance people this week, whoever it might be. That's a tough thing to do. And then for us as Christians to be patient with each other. Be patient until the day of the Lord comes. Then, brothers and sisters, see how the farmer waits for the land to yield his valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. Now, think about the farmer for a minute, and for most of us, we're not farmers. There might be a few gardeners among us. I know we see the vegetables come out here and there. Farming is a patient business because you do something knowing it is going to result in something else, but you do not see the fruit of that immediately. Imagine how different farming would be, how many more people would want to be farmers if you planted things and you went to bed and the next morning you woke up and it was there. How many more gardeners there would be among us? How many less dead plants there would be in my house? We don't have the patience for that. There's a kind of bamboo in the Far East that they will plant this bamboo and they will go out and they will water it every day that it's not raining. They'll go out and they'll water. And then they'll look and there's nothing there. And they'll go out on the water again and there's nothing there. And for 3 months, they will water this bamboo. And for most of those 3 months, they will see nothing. And then they will get right toward the end of that 3-month period, and in a very short period of time, a matter of a couple weeks, that bamboo will grow something like 70 or 80 feet. And they'll have to keep going out and cutting it off every day as it's growing so much. And I would imagine that there are probably a lot of kids of farmers over there that see this and they think, why do we go out and we water this day after day? And then as it begins to grow, they are absolutely shocked. Now, maybe it's not a farmer for you, but I want you to think of patience in your own life. The ways we develop patience, and be careful before you pray for it because God will bring it to you. How do you develop patience in your own life? Where do you see patience begin? For those of you who might be teachers or professors, you think, got a student that I just can't figure this kid out, why they're even here, and then you start to see something grow in them. For those of us, you have people within your own family that you may get frustrated with, and then you see the growth come. With each other, we have moments of impatience, and then we see the growth that comes. And James would say to us, think of the farmer. The farmer understands what it is to see nothing and then to see something. And he continues in faith doing the job that he knows will lead to something. So he says, you too, be patient and stand firm because the Lord's coming is near. Stand firm. Now, what we have turned stand firm into somehow is be obnoxious. And I don't know where the change between those two came. We can stand firm without being obnoxious. But James would say to us to stand firm. Is standing firm easy? No. Was it easy in his world? Absolutely not. Is it easy in our world sometimes? No, it's not. It is not the popular thing to stand on the things that we stand on as Christians. We are looked at as crazy. We are looked at as old-fashioned. We are looked at as backwards sometimes. And James would encourage us here to stand firm, to have a patience that understands that whatever folks think around here, however well we are accepted, we are working towards something eternal. So we start by being patient, and then we're standing firm. And then he says, oh boy, don't grumble against each other. Do not grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. Don't grumble. Any grumbling yet today? I had to wake up 2 teenage boys this morning. There was grumbling. I went to a basketball game last night, watched Northwest Christian win again. They're doing a lot of that this year. Officials, so-so. There was grumbling. kind of a louder version of grumbling that was going on at the basketball game. A lot of grumbling in life. And we could take it all the way back to the beginning. Grumbling that went on early in the creation of God's people. We could take it to the story of Moses, and they're freed, and then they start grumbling because the food is boring, or they don't like the scenery or something. They'd rather be back in slavery where things were reliable. Think of the things we grumble about and how silly they are. And then he would say to us, don't grumble with each other. Don't grumble with each other. Don't grumble at each other. Too many things to complain about. And this is one of those spots that I look at myself and think, we could skip this verse. Let's just move on to the next. Because I can grumble too. I have a way I like things. I have a way I don't like things. What are we grumbling about? And what good is it doing us? Maybe is the better question we should ask. Is our grumbling supposed to lead to something, or do we just like to grumble? And all of us, as we look at don't grumble, I could probably have you imagine in your head who's the grumbler. And you got somebody there. It's probably not you, by the way, for some reason. I'm not imagining me. I know I grumble. And each of us, I think, needs to look at ourselves and think about how am I being hard to deal with? How am I being disagreeable? How am I grumbling? And how can I do better to change that? Don't grumble with each other. Brothers and sisters, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As an example, now for us, if you're in the adult class on Sunday mornings, we're going through the minor prophets. We've been talking more about what they say than how they've been reacted to. And the constant story of prophets throughout Scripture is people don't like those guys because they're telling people things they don't want to hear. They step on too many toes. They challenge people with what they're doing or what they're thinking. And as a result, people don't want to hear that. And generally speaking, the way we would handle that today is we'll just change the channel. Gets a little too uncomfortable for me. I don't want to hear any more of it. I'm just going to tune it out. I'm going to stop listening. I'm going to turn to another channel. Think of what our examples are. We've got the prophets of old here that, as James says, they learn patience in suffering. Think of our examples of patience in suffering. And I don't think you probably have to look very far. I think of the different people that last weekend, if you were not here last weekend, one of the things our guest speaker, Andrew, likes to do is text bomb people. And so he had everybody get it's better than it sounds, by the way, if you don't know. He had people get their cell phones out. He told everybody a phone number, and he said, we are going to text some love and encouragement to these people. And we started with a baby who was suffering in ICU with respiratory issues. We moved to a mother who had been convinced by family members that she was not a good mother and she's about to have another child, and she just needed somebody to encourage her that she could be a good mom. There was another kid who was dealing with a bone issue that had surgery and was going to be in a cast for a period of time. We had all these different people we were texting encouragement to. And I thought about these people in this context. The first family, the DeBose family that have the sick baby in ICU, they are some of the most patient in difficult times people that I know. And they've faced a lot more challenges than a lot of people their age have faced, and they have come through it gracefully. And when I think of an example of patience through suffering, I think of them in the situation that they're in. I think of people who have lost people in an untimely way who are close to them and the way they handle it. I think of people who have gone through accidents where their lives were changed forever, either through physical problems or mental problems that have come as a result of that, and their grace and their patience in that suffering. And I start to think about my own impatience and how small it is. Because the reasons for my impatience are not important. It's not happening in my timing. That's my impatience. How many of us could sit down and talk about how things don't happen in our timing? My impatience is waiting in line too long. My impatience is getting to the place where you get your license plate and pulling a number off and looking up on the wall and seeing that number, and those numbers are way too far apart, and I know that my whole morning is going to be here. My impatience is not my child sitting in ICU fighting for life. My impatience is not something much greater than that. James says to us, look for the example around you of patience. He gives us the example of the farmer, but we see so many in our own lives of how to live patiently. He continues on, as you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. When I am not being patient, when I am struggling with that, when I want things to happen faster or more my way, I do not find myself centered in on the idea that God is full of compassion and mercy. I find myself centered in on the idea, why is God's timing so far off from where mine is? Why can't God understand the difficulty of this situation and make it better? And instead, what he tells us is we are suffering and we are building perseverance and patience, that we are seeing at work God's compassion and God's mercy. Does not always come about in the way we want it, does it? We just want that lavished on us. We want it obvious in life. We want things to go smoothly. And God doesn't always show his compassion and his mercy in that way. And sometimes when we are so busy being impatient, we miss it. Totally miss the lesson God is trying to teach us. Totally miss the blessing that's going to come as a result of it. As hard as these last few weeks have been for the DeBose family, for instance, what other circumstance would have led them to get about 80 texts from Oregon on a Friday night, encouraging them and reminding them that God loves them and that they are not in this alone? Now, I am going to be fully honest with you. I would choose any other path to get those texts if I were them. But that is the path God took them down. And will their lives be blessed as a result of that? Absolutely. Will their eternity be blessed as a result of that? Yes, it will. Hard to get there? Sometimes life is tough. I know that's the understatement of understatements, but it is not always smooth, it is not always easy, and being a part of God's family doesn't change that. Still can be hard sometimes. But as we see these examples around us, we can persevere in patience and we can see his compassion and his mercy at work. And if we can focus in and see this, then it's easy for us to show this to the people around us. And they can understand that even when it's hard, there is a reason that we're keeping on. There's a reason that we stick with God because we understand who he is and we understand what he has promised. And then, this is weird to me. Because depending on the version of Scripture you have, I know King James, you've got just verse after verse after verse, and they're all kind of their own thing. If you've got NIV or ESV, they like to divide things up into paragraphs, and they also like to divide things up, and several other versions do this too, into sections, and you have a subheading that tells you what the section is all about. And there's a lot of disagreement about this verse as to whether it belongs with what we've just looked at, and whether it belongs with what we're going to next. And so, being the sitting on the fence guy that I can be at times, I thought we'd do both. And so I thought we would end here this week, but we're also going to start here next week and look at two possibilities of where this can be going. But here in verse 12, he says something that doesn't seem to fit a whole lot with the stuff before it, and maybe not necessarily with the stuff after it, but here it is wedged in between. Above all, my brothers and sisters, we've talked about patience, we've talked about perseverance, we've talked about compassion and mercy. Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear by heaven or earth or by anything else. All you need is a simple yes or no, otherwise you will be condemned. Doesn't seem to really fit, does it? It's kind of here tagged on the end. It's something we hear back in the Sermon on the Mount that fit a little better there in our minds. But I think what God is telling us through James here is live lives of integrity. Now, patience is a piece of that, but so is the way we speak, so is the way we talk, so is what our word is worth. Live lives of integrity. Patience and integrity, and that is a setting that develops a place for God to show what he talks about in between, which is his compassion and his mercy. And if we don't see enough of his compassion and his mercy in our lives, maybe we need to go back and work on the patience and integrity side. And believe me, talking to me as much as you here, because especially when it comes to patience, I am not there. And I need reminders. And I need to realize that I don't have the patience that James is talking about. But for each of us with each other, if we're living lives of patience and integrity and we're seeing His compassion and mercy flowing through us, do you know what else comes as a result of that? A whole lot less grumbling that we looked at a few verses ago. All of this ties together to make us who we are as Christians. And I will tell you something else. If this is what people around us saw as Christianity, it would be a whole lot less difficult to be a Christian in our world today. Because all of this stuff, this makes for good neighbors and friends and family members. Not just good church members, not just good Christians. This makes an impact on our world now. When we are people of our word without the oaths, it makes an impact on our world. When we are patient with each other, it makes an impact on our world. And when we stop the grumbling, people want to be around that. We got enough grumbling already. If we can find some good people that don't grumble, I want to be around that. So this morning, if like me, you look at some of this and think, I got some work to do. You are not alone. I think we all have some work to do. And if I haven't picked on you with all of these things, surely there's one in here that you could look at and say, yeah, I could do a little better there. And we as a family, we want to work together at being better at all of that. We who have taken on Christ, who've decided to live our lives for Him, our lives need to start looking like lives lived for Him. We don't need to wait to have somebody fly thousands of miles and sit up here on a stool and give us a phone number to text encouragement to somebody. We can do that now. We don't need to wait for incredible stories of patience because you can look all around you and see incredible stories of patience. You can see people persevering, and those people, with your encouragement, can persevere so much more. And for some of us, maybe we're the ones in need of that. And this morning, just know that you are not going unnoticed. We see the things that you do. We see how you work for God. We see the patience you have. And it is a blessing to each of us. This morning, if that sounds like a family you want to be a part of, sounds like a family I want to be a part of. And you can confess His name, you can believe in Him, you can take Him on in baptism, and your life can be changed. And you can find out it's still kind of difficult on the other side of that. But we're going to work at it together. If you as a Christian look at your life this morning and think, that doesn't sound all that descriptive of me, you're probably not alone there either. And together we can work and be better. If there's something we can pray about in your life, something you need to confess, or if you want to take Him on in baptism, or if you have some other need that the church can help you with, please come as we stand and sing.